The evening had a soft, golden glow as Clara's Vermont home buzzed with the quiet chaos of family gathering, the kind where laughter mixes with the scent of roasted vegetables and fresh bread, and stories seem to stretch endlessly, tying generations together. Clara moved between the kitchen and dining room, filling plates, smiling at jokes she had heard 100 times but still enjoyed, watching her family, her brother Mark, his wife, their children, her sister-in-law's cousins who had come from out of state, and finally, Daniel, her nephew, who sat at the far end of the table, silent, almost invisible in the swirl of conversation. Everyone was talking at once, voices overlapping, stories jumping from one topic to another, from childhood memories of snowball fights to the newest jobs and achievements, but Daniel barely spoke, picking at his food, his eyes distant and thoughtful, as though he were somewhere far away, somewhere beyond the warm lights of the kitchen and the cozy chatter. Clara had noticed it earlier, the way he lingered at the window while the others laughed, the slight crease in his brow that seemed out of place on the face that used to be so open and full of mischief. There had been a hint of something unspoken, something heavy, a quiet tension that didn't belong in the normal rhythm of family dinners, but everyone was too caught up in their own stories to notice, except Clara, who had always had a way of seeing the subtle shifts in people, the small things that betrayed feelings they tried to hide. As dessert was brought in, pie cooling on the counter and the aroma of cinnamon filling the room, Daniel still didn't speak, and Clara felt an unusual pang of worry, a tug in her chest she couldn't shake, wondering if he was all right, if something was bothering him, if he felt lonely or unheard in the midst of all the noise and laughter. She tried to catch his eye, giving a small smile, but he looked away quickly, focusing on his plate, as if afraid to meet her gaze, and that made her heart beat faster, a mixture of concern and anticipation building slowly. After the dishes were cleared and the clatter of utensils faded, the house settled into a quiet hush, broken only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall, and Clara poured herself a cup of tea, wrapping her hands around the warm mug, the quiet moment a sharp contrast to the lively chaos that had filled the house just moments ago. Daniel stayed seated, still at the edge of the living room, the shadows playing across his thoughtful face, his hands clasped together tightly, and Clara felt the urge to reach out, to break the silence, but she paused, sensing that whatever he was holding back was significant, that this night held more than just leftover family chatter. She moved to sit near him, letting the mug warm her hands while she studied his expression, noting the slight tremor in his lips, the way his eyes darted toward the window as if searching for courage outside the glass. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was only a few minutes, Daniel spoke, his voice soft and hesitant, barely above the whisper of the wind outside, "Aunt Clara, there's something I need to tell you." The words were simple, but they carried weight, an invisible pressure that made Clara's heart tighten unexpectedly. She leaned closer instinctively, ready to offer comfort, reassurance, and a safe space for whatever truth he was about to share, and yet, a small part of her felt a flutter of nervousness, a sudden curiosity about what could be so important that he waited for everyone else to leave. Daniel swallowed hard, looked down at his hands, then back at her with an intensity that made her pause, sensing the vulnerability and honesty in him, and she realized that this was a moment of courage for him, a crossing into territory he had been too afraid to explore before. Clara nodded gently, a silent invitation for him to speak, her heart beating faster, a mixture of worry and anticipation swirling inside her. The room seemed to shrink around them, the familiar sounds of the house fading until it felt like it was just the two of them, two hearts in quiet alignment, and the weight of unspoken words hung in the air like fragile glass, waiting to be carefully handled. As Daniel finally opened his mouth again, the first syllables trembling with fear and hope, Clara felt the start of a story that would change both of them, a secret held close for too long, a truth so intimate that it would ripple through her thoughts, awaken memories she hadn't touched in years, and make her question not only his courage but her own choices, her own capacity for understanding, and her ability to hold love in its purest, most honest form. She waited, breath held, heart open, knowing that the moment Daniel was about to reveal could not be undone, that once spoken, everything would feel different, richer, deeper, and yet somehow terrifying in its clarity. And when he finally took that last shaky breath and spoke the words that had been locked away inside him, a hush fell over Clara's heart, a mixture of disbelief, pride, and something else she couldn't quite name, as the story began to unfold, a story that was about courage, love, and the quiet moments when truth breaks the surface and changes everything, leaving them both on the edge of something real, something fragile, something impossible to ignore, a secret that would challenge them, inspire them, and quietly reshape the way Clara saw the world, her family, and herself, all in the span of one soft, unforgettable night. Clara and Daniel moved to the living room, the soft light from the lamp casting a gentle glow that made the shadows dance along the walls, and for a moment, the world outside didn't exist, only the quiet tension between them, the air thick with unspoken words and the fragile expectation of truth waiting to be revealed. Daniel's hands fidgeted nervously in his lap, fingers twisting together as if he could hold his courage like a rope, and Clara, sensing the weight of the moment, leaned forward slightly, her eyes gentle but steady, encouraging him without a word, letting him know he was safe to speak, that whatever he said would not be judged, only heard, and understood. The silence stretched, comforting yet heavy, until Daniel finally exhaled, a long breath that seemed to release years of fear, and he said, "I'm in love." Clara's first instinct was to smile, to feel a rush of warmth at the simplicity of the declaration, the kind of pure emotion that reminded her of first loves and tender moments she had experienced long ago, and she reached for his hand instinctively, brushing her fingers lightly over his, a small gesture that carried all the support and care she felt for him. But then he continued, his voice lower now, almost a whisper, trembling with vulnerability and hope, "And it's someone I didn't expect to feel this way about. I've been scared to tell anyone, even myself at times, because I didn't think it could be real." Clara's heart ached with a mixture of pride and surprise. Daniel, the quiet nephew she had watched grow up, who often carried his emotions inside like a secret treasure, was opening up in a way she had never seen before, and she realized the depth of courage it took for him to speak honestly about something so intimate and precious. He told her about Michael, the man who had slowly become the center of his life, someone who understood him in ways no one else did, someone who made the ordinary days feel extraordinary, and as Daniel spoke, his eyes lit up with a mix of wonder and longing, the kind that comes from finding a connection so profound that it reshapes the way you see the world, and Clara couldn't help but be drawn into the story, feeling every emotion with him, imagining the quiet mornings, the laughter over simple meals, the shared glances that said everything without words, the steady reassurance of someone who loves you unconditionally. Daniel's voice shook slightly as he recounted the first time he realized he could no longer hide his feelings, the way his heart had raced, how he had tried to act normal, to pretend everything was the same, but inside, everything had shifted, and when he described the moment Michael had held his hand, the warmth and certainty of that touch, Clara felt her chest tighten, not with shock, but with a deep recognition of love's quiet power. The way it can arrive unexpectedly and change everything without warning, making you brave, making you vulnerable, making you whole. He explained that their love had grown in small, steady steps, not rushed or reckless, but deliberate and careful, each day building trust, each conversation weaving them closer, and Clara could see it in his eyes, the honesty, the longing, the certainty that this was not a fleeting emotion but something that had taken root and could not be ignored. And then he said the words that made Clara's breath catch, "I'm planning to propose." The declaration was simple, yet it carried the weight of dreams and hope, of a future imagined with someone who had become indispensable, and Clara felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, a mixture of joy and awe at the vulnerability of the man before her, the bravery of admitting love out loud, of daring to dream openly despite fear of rejection or misunderstanding. She wanted to say so many things, to tell him how proud she was, how she admired his honesty, how love like this deserved celebration, yet words seemed small compared to the magnitude of what he had just shared, so she simply nodded, letting her presence speak volumes, letting him know that she understood, that she felt it too, that she recognized the courage it took to bare one's heart. As Daniel continued, he spoke of the future they hoped to build together, of plans small and big, of moving in together, of dreams of travel, of quiet nights and loud laughter, of supporting each other through challenges, and Clara listened intently, imagining them, smiling at the thought of her nephew finally finding the happiness he deserved, the kind of love that doesn't demand perfection but thrives in acceptance, in shared understanding, in patience. She noticed the subtle shifts in his expression, the moments when he almost faltered, almost retreated into fear, and she offered reassurance with her gaze, with the gentle squeeze of his hand, silently telling him that love was never wrong when it was true, and that telling the truth, no matter how frightening, was always the first step to freedom. And as the night wore on, the room wrapped in soft shadows and the gentle hum of the heating, Clara realized that this conversation was more than just a revelation about Daniel's heart. It was a moment of intimacy and connection that touched her own life in unexpected ways, stirring memories of choices made, paths not taken, and the quiet, persistent longing she herself had once carried, reminding her that love, in all its forms, deserved courage and honesty, that speaking it aloud could be transformative, both for the speaker and the listener, and that some truths, once shared, create ripples that reach far beyond the initial moment. She stayed with him, listening until the words ran out, until Daniel leaned back, exhausted but relieved, the tension in his shoulders eased, the light in his eyes softer, steadier, and she realized that this night would linger in her memory not just as the night he shared his secret, but as the night she felt the quiet miracle of love's revelation, as if the room itself had held its breath for him, as if every shadow and corner of the house had conspired to witness his bravery, to honor the honesty of his heart. And even as she walked him to the door later, seeing him step into the cool night air with a hesitant smile, she felt a strange mix of pride, awe, and bittersweet reflection, knowing that this was the beginning of something monumental, that Daniel's courage had not only changed his world but had touched hers, and that sometimes, the simplest words, spoken in the softest voice, carry the heaviest weight, the kind that shifts hearts, opens doors, and leaves an imprint that lingers long after the moment has passed, leaving both of them standing on the edge of something new, something real, something that could never be taken back, something that would quietly shape the days to come in ways neither could yet imagine. After Daniel left, the quiet of Clara's Vermont home settled in like a soft blanket, wrapping the rooms in shadows and silence, and she sat alone in the living room, her mug of tea now cold in her hands, staring at the flickering light of the lamp as though it could illuminate the thoughts swirling in her mind, thoughts she hadn't faced in years but that Daniel's confession had awakened with surprising force. The house felt both empty and full at the same time, full of memories, of laughter once shared, of footsteps and voices that had long faded, and in that emptiness, Clara felt a strange ache, a mixture of pride, joy, and a subtle sadness she couldn't quite name, as though Daniel's courage had unlocked a door in her own heart, a door she had long kept closed, the one that led to dreams she had abandoned, to feelings she had buried under responsibility and fear, and she realized suddenly how many times she had avoided honesty, how many times she had silenced the quiet longing inside her, letting fear dictate her choices instead of love, letting the world tell her what was safe instead of what was real. She thought about the man she had once loved, the one who had filled her days with laughter and warmth, the one she had let go when life seemed too complicated, when circumstances and pride had seemed larger than the pull of her own heart, and she felt the sharp sting of regret, the bitter taste of what if that lingered despite the years that had passed, and she could see now how Daniel's honesty mirrored the honesty she had denied herself, how his courage illuminated the path she had refused to take, how love, when brave enough to speak, could break walls that seemed permanent. She imagined Daniel with Michael, the two of them sharing quiet mornings and laughter that flowed easily, the simple moments that carried more weight than grand gestures, and she felt a deep, almost physical ache in her chest, a longing for that same courage and clarity, for the ability to speak her truth without hesitation, without fear, without worrying about judgment or consequence, and she realized that in witnessing his love, she was forced to confront her own, to remember the emotions she had tried to bury, to feel again the ache of possibility and the thrill of risk that comes when the heart is open and honest. Clara rose and walked to the window, the cold night pressing against the glass, her reflection staring back at her, tired but alive, and she traced the outline of her face, seeing the lines of experience and time, the marks of choices both right and wrong, and she understood that life rarely offers second chances in the way we expect them, but sometimes, through the courage of others, we are reminded that the heart is never truly finished, that longing never truly fades, and that love, patient and enduring, waits for those willing to speak it aloud. She thought about the note Daniel had left behind, folded neatly on the table, words simple yet profound, "Thank you for listening. It mattered more than you know," and she realized that listening, witnessing, holding space for truth, was a kind of love in itself, a bridge between hearts that allowed connection, that allowed the fragile, trembling beginnings of hope to take root, and she felt a surge of gratitude and tenderness, both for him and for herself, for being part of a moment so intimate and life-changing, for being allowed to see the raw, unguarded part of a person she loved deeply. The night stretched on, but Clara's mind did not rest. She replayed every word Daniel had spoken, every pause, every flicker of emotion, and in doing so, she began to forgive herself for the choices she had made, to soften the sharp edges of regret, to feel once more the pulse of life in her chest, the quiet thrill of what could be if she dared to embrace honesty and courage in her own heart. Memories and reflections blended into a quiet revelation. She had lived cautiously, she had loved cautiously, but the heart was not meant for caution, it was meant for risk, for truth, for the willingness to open completely, even when the outcome was uncertain. Clara sat back down, closing her eyes, imagining her own life moving forward, imagining the possibility of pursuing happiness without fear, and she felt a strange lightness, a lifting of the weight she had carried unknowingly, a recognition that witnessing love, witnessing Daniel's unshakable certainty, had shifted something deep inside her, that her own story was far from over, that perhaps the chapters she had thought closed were merely waiting for her to breathe life into them again, to allow love to take its rightful place. She thought about the moments she had denied herself, about the quiet nights filled with longing, about the men and women who had passed through her life leaving traces she had ignored, and she understood that the ache she felt now was not regret but awakening, a gentle, persistent reminder that the heart remembers, that love remembers, that courage can come at any age, and that truth, once spoken by someone else, can illuminate the paths we had been too afraid to see. By the time the first light of morning touched the curtains, Clara had made a silent promise to herself, to honor feelings she had long neglected, to allow herself the same honesty Daniel had shown, to be brave enough to recognize love when it appeared again, and to trust in the beauty of human connection, the kind that is patient, tender, and life-changing. She realized she was not just witnessing her nephew's happiness but learning from it, feeling it, allowing it to shape her own understanding of courage and desire, of longing and fulfillment, and in that quiet, reflective moment, she felt an unexpected surge of hope, a reassurance that hearts could still heal, still open, still risk and win, and that love, true, patient, honest love, was always real, always possible, even if it arrived in small, quiet, unexpected ways, and that sometimes, the simplest truths told by someone else are the ones that awaken the deepest parts of ourselves, leaving us on the brink of transformation, standing ready to embrace the unknown with a heart finally willing to be brave. Weeks passed, and autumn gradually gave way to early winter, painting Clara's world in shades of gold and frost, and she found herself traveling to Toronto to attend a small engagement party for Daniel and Michael, a gathering that was warm and intimate, filled with soft laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the quiet hum of conversations that carried the gentle energy of joy. And from the moment she stepped through the door, Clara was struck by the atmosphere of love that seemed to hover in the air, a tangible presence that wrapped around her heart and made her chest feel both full and tender at the same time. She watched Daniel move through the room with ease, his smile brighter than she had ever seen, the nervous energy from weeks before replaced with calm confidence. The way he laughed at Michael's teasing and the affectionate glances they shared made her feel the weight of every word he had spoken that night in Vermont. The courage it had taken him to reveal his heart, the quiet bravery that had changed not just his life but hers as well, because witnessing it had reminded her of her own untold stories, the love she had once denied herself, and the courage she had not yet fully claimed. Clara lingered near the edge of the gathering, observing the warmth between the couple, the way Michael's hand rested lightly on Daniel's back, the small gestures of intimacy that were both simple and profound, and she felt a deep swell of emotion, a mixture of pride, happiness, and a subtle ache that was not sadness but the soft echo of her own longing, a reflection of the life she had once imagined for herself and the life she still might create if she allowed herself to take the risk. As she moved closer to join the conversations, she realized that love could exist in many forms, that it could be patient, gentle, and brave all at once, and that sometimes, watching someone else embrace it fully can awaken feelings and possibilities in us we had thought long gone, leaving a spark of hope that refuses to die. And she smiled quietly, acknowledging to herself that life often gives second chances, not in the way we expect, but in the quiet ways that push us to recognize what we've been missing, the truths we have been afraid to speak, and the courage we need to live authentically. The room was alive with congratulations, friends and family offering toasts, and Daniel caught her eye across the room, a small, knowing smile passing between them, one that carried gratitude, love, and a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared, the vulnerability he had shown, the lesson in bravery and honesty that Clara had witnessed and absorbed, and in that glance, she felt a gentle warmth spread through her, a reassurance that love is always real when it is nurtured with truth, patience, and openness, that courage is contagious, and that witnessing happiness can sometimes illuminate our own path just as powerfully as living it ourselves. She spent the evening talking to both Daniel and Michael, listening to their plans, laughing at their stories, and feeling the effortless rhythm of their connection, and as she observed them together, she reflected on her own life, realizing that she had long carried fear disguised as practicality, hesitation dressed as caution, and in seeing their love, she understood how unnecessary it had all been, how much brighter life could be if she allowed herself the same honesty, openness, and willingness to follow her heart, because the example before her was living proof that love does not demand perfection, only presence, attention, and courage, and that when hearts align, even quietly, the impact is profound, affecting everyone who bears witness. As the night drew on and soft music played in the background, Clara found herself standing near the window, looking at the twinkling lights of the city outside, feeling the crisp air brush her face through the slightly open window, and she thought about the journey that had led her here, the conversations, the quiet reflections, the tears shed in solitude, the memories awakened by Daniel's honesty, and she realized that the true gift of love is not only in being loved or loving another, but in the way it reshapes us, opens doors within us we thought were closed, and teaches us to see the beauty, courage, and possibility in every heart, including our own. When Daniel came to her side, his hand brushing briefly against hers, she felt a rush of emotion, a gentle thrill that was not romantic in nature toward him, but deeply human, the kind of emotion that comes from witnessing bravery, truth, and authenticity, and in that moment, she knew she could carry the lesson forward, could honor the feeling awakened inside her by daring to open her heart, by allowing herself to believe in hope, in love, and in the extraordinary ordinary moments that define life, moments like a nephew revealing his deepest truth, a quiet room at night, a smile shared across a crowded room, and the still, tender recognition that love, when spoken, when lived fully, is real enough to change everything. As she raised her glass to join in the toast, she looked at Daniel and Michael standing together, radiant and unshakable, and she felt a quiet swell of gratitude, not only for their happiness but for the reminder that the heart is resilient, that courage and honesty are transformative, and that even when life has been cautious and measured, there is always space for boldness, for hope, for taking the risk to believe in the magic of human connection. And she realized that this night, this gathering, this simple witnessing of love had opened a door within her own soul, a door she was finally ready to walk through, ready to embrace the possibilities that come with allowing herself to hope, to feel, to love again, in whatever way her life might shape itself next, because witnessing love, pure, steady, brave love, was enough to remind her that life is not over until the heart stops staring, and that each moment, each choice, each brave word, carries the power to change everything, to illuminate paths previously unseen, to leave hearts fuller, richer, and ready for whatever comes next. And as the evening ended and the couple danced in the center of the room, surrounded by friends and family, Clara smiled softly to herself, feeling lighter, freer, and more alive than she had in years, carrying with her the knowledge that love is always real when it is true, and that witnessing it, sharing in it, and believing in it can quietly, profoundly, and beautifully change everything about how we see ourselves, the world, and the future that waits.